Hey everybody, hope you're doing well here on this, it's a Thursday then when this video comes out. I wanted to share something kind of special today. Now I'm off of work because of my newborn situation, but there's been this project I've been sitting on for a while. This gentleman by the name of Aerick Koerner, he is a doctoral student at American University, I believe in advanced statistics. He's also an MMA fan, and he reached out to me I want to say 18 months ago to start working on some projects, and we did. He took a heavy, really interesting look at UFC fighter pay. In fact, I'm going to submit this to you right now. I think his examination of UFC fighter pay is probably the best that I have ever seen, certainly the best publicly done to date. Incredibly informative, really helping people to understand who makes money and for what reasons and by what mechanisms. It's not really what people think, or if it is, it's a little bit off. And he really clarifies and crystallizes this issue in ways that it's a little academic, but I really encourage you to get through this because at the end, well, throughout it, of course, but certainly the conclusions that he draws and the evidence he presents are incredibly important. Now, a couple of notes here. This is about a year old, and you're going to say, well, if it's a year old, how good is the data? Of course, more data is needed. There's always going to be more data that's needed, but fighter pay has not substantively changed in the last year or so, number one. Number two, this video is very lo-fi. You're going to see. It was before I think I had this desk. It was before I had this mic or this arm or even this camera that I'm using right now. It is very, very lo-fi. So think of it more as like a pilot program where if that one was good and you like the information and you feel like it's something different in the marketplace, because I got to tell you, I think that it is, we can do more and we can really up the production quality the next time around. And one more note about this, as I mentioned, look, some parts of this are going to feel a little academic, and there are parts of it that I don't get because I don't know the heavy math. But the slide presentation is in the description box below. You can go through it. You can look at the math yourself. You can look at the conclusions and the graphs and the charts and everything in between. But I'm just tired of MMA media doing this thing where like so-and-so said this about so-and-so and then asking the other person what they did. And look, I've done some of that too, in part because we just get sucked into this black hole of bullshit media coverage. In part, sometimes the fighters want to talk about it. In part, because sometimes it's actually news. So you can't entirely avoid it. And I said, I'm as guilty as charged. I've done it before. But we can break out of that and do something a little bit different. It is so goddamn refreshing. So this was a bit of a project that I shelved because right when we were doing it, in fact, the day that we shot this video, I got the call to start doing the MMA Hour, the MMA Beat, and all that kind of stuff. So the project just got put on the back burner. But it didn't get put on the back burner because it wasn't good. It just got put on the back burner because I've had an overwhelming year since the time this video was recorded. So without further ado, here is the sit down. If you got any questions and anything you want to know, email me, lukethomasnews@gmail.com. Eric gives out his information in this video as well if you want to contact him about some of the math. But here it is. Here is Aerick Koerner and I discussing the truth behind UFC fighter pay. Hey, what's up, everybody? Luke Thomas here. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. So on this YouTube channel, we do lots of things. I do post-fight specials, as you know, after an event is over. Let's see, what else? I do fighter interviews. Let me talk to the microphone here so you can hear me. I do lots of different things, but today we're going to shake it up even a little bit more. Joining me over here is a guy who lives here in Washington, D.C., and came to me with a very interesting pitch, and I said, you know what? We need to turn that into something. So everyone, meet Aerick Koerner. Eric, how are you, my friend?
Doing very well. I'm glad to be here, too.
Yes, all right. Now you can look at me, my friend.
All right.
Eric, who are you? Why are you here? Tell the folks what you do.
First of all, I'm a huge MMA fan. But more importantly to you guys, I'm a PhD student at American University, and I study health policy. And in studying health policy, I have to know a lot about economics and market behaviors. And so just for fun, I decided to apply some of these methods and concepts into the MMA realm. And I reached out to you saying, hey, look, I'm looking at this fighter pay study. I'm looking at these other studies. Do you want to talk about them? Is any of this interesting to you? And you said...
I said, fuck no.
Yeah, you said, hell yeah. But yeah. So that's why I'm here today to talk about, specifically today, fighter pay.
All right, so let's talk about fighter pay. You put together... Now, what do we call this? A study? Like, how would you describe what you've done here?
It's an inductive analysis. And so there's inductive and deductive reasoning and research. Inductive is basically saying, I'm going to go out there and try to find a hypothesis or find some trend within the data. And deductive is saying, I think this is true, so I'm going to go try to prove that. So what I did here is I just went out there and looked at all the fighter pay data and tried to see if I could find anything in there that was interesting.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to put this study in the description box below, but of course we'll put graphic overlays here on the screen so everybody can follow along, all right? So if you want to look at it by yourself independently, just go down in the description box below, but other than that, you can just see what's on the screen. All right, so with that out of the way, you have here the origin of the product, and I'm going to go these by slide numbers or page numbers. I have 47 of them.
Yep.
On page 2, you write, I began with the initial goal to test the claim made by Dana White on season 28 of The Ultimate Fighter, namely, you look at all these other sports, women don't make what men make, women don't make anywhere, women made more in this effing, I'm assuming it's effing sport, than the men. So why is this the origin of the project?
Late at night, I had...
Is it about just women?
So initially it was just about women. And I just wanted to do just like a very simple student's t-test, which is like one of the first things you learn, maybe in high school or undergrad. I just wanted to see, put all the male purses up, put all the female purses up, and is there a statistical difference between the two? To go back to it more, I was basically just sitting on the couch procrastinating, writing something academic, and this was on TV, so I said, I'm going to do it, fuck that. It's late at night, I'm going to have fun. So I did that. So I went online and I found all the purses of all the fighters. We'll get to the dates in a second. And I just basically put their purses up in Excel, and then I put a 0 or a 1 next to it, 0 for female, 1 for male. And I just ran a student's t-test to see if there was a statistically significant difference between them. It's very important for me to say, most people might not know what statistical significance is, but basically when you're analyzing data or you're analyzing observations, the statistical software you're using is going to look at the characteristics of the data and the differences or the relationships between the data. If it's statistically significant, it's not due to random chance. So if
but there could be a lot of factors that make it statistically significant.
Yeah,
it's just not random.
Yes,
right.
Exactly. Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
So what that tells you is there's a reason for this. Now we got to figure out what the reason is.
Potentially, yeah. And so the first thing I did was a student's t-test, which is really, really fundamental. And nobody in academia is going to do it. In academia, you're doing a t-test to begin to see like, where do I go?
Right.
Right. It doesn't mean anything. It
gives you a lay of the land to start.
Yeah, it's pretty fundamental. So
all right, so here you have on slide or page 3 fighter purse amounts. Now you noted these are not universally disclosed to the public. The amount observed does not reflect fighters' total earnings, and purse split usually 50-50 in show and win money. What about these considerations matter?
It matters because when you want to research something, you want the whole population, which is not really feasible. When you're studying, you want everything available that could be available, or you want a sample that is random. So what that means is there's no systematic bias within the sample. So only getting purses from Arizona, California, Florida, Georgia, the 12 or 13 states that report it. There might be some characteristics about the fighters who fought in those states versus fighting in, like, I don't know, Oklahoma or Oregon or some state that doesn't, right? Mm-hmm. So especially when you consider California and Nevada, Las Vegas, those are kind of like the marquee spots.
Right.
So the sample might be biased potentially towards higher end guys because that's where Daniel Cormier fights, that's where Anderson Silva fights.
Right.
It's important to note just to start off on the foot that the data and the sample are not totally random.
And also, you noted here the amount does not reflect fighters' total earnings. This is well known.
Yeah.
Of course, the Reebok money, pay-per-view money. How much does this undercut the confidence in your results?
It doesn't. For what I'm doing here, I'm trying to understand what's available to understand. So, the only people who would know more than this are going to be the UFC, and that data is just not available to anybody else.
How much do you want that data?
I think it would be very interesting to me, but I think it would be better for everyone if that data was public.
So talk to me about slide 4. You collected this from June 2016 to December 2017. 16 independent variables, which we'll go into in a second. Mm-hmm. Sample consisted of 509 observations. Let's walk through this from the top down here, if we can, very quickly. Why this interval, 2016 to 2017? Why that time period?
Yeah, so I wanted to do something that was reasonable for me to actually collect just by myself. And the second point was June 2016 is kind of the end of the fighters at the low end being paid $8,000 to show, $8,000 to win. It all transitioned at that point to $10,000 to show, $10,000 to win. So I just wanted to like a standardized new pay scale on that.
What are these 16 independent variables?
So it's one is what I could think of, and it's two what I could think of that was related to economic theory. So we can get to we can get into them in a second, but I just, like I said, this is inductive, so I was trying to find any relationship I could, anything that...
Give me an example of an independent variable.
You want me to define an independent variable?
Yeah.
An independent variable is, so there's dependent variables, which are what we're studying, which is the fighter pay in this case, and then there are independent variables, which are things that changes in the independent variable, and we're measuring how they change the dependent variable.
So give me an example.
Okay.
Anything.
Okay. So, I mean, in just... not even related to this study, but if you look at somebody's tenure in a company and their pay within the company, you would expect to see the longer they work with the company, the higher their pay to be, right? So as tenure increases, there's a positive relationship with the dependent variable, which is pay, which would decrease too in most people's jobs.
Got it. Okay. And now the sample consisted of 509 observations. What is an observation in this case?
So in this case, the unit of analysis is one fighter purse. So an observation is the amount they got paid. A fighter was paid per fight. Is that good enough?
Yes.
Okay.
Are those the only observations?
What do you mean?
Like, are there other kinds of observations? Or when you say observation, because remember, we're using a little bit of jargon here to help define the discussion. Yeah. It does help to clarify that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I tried to get rid of the patois or the jargon as much as I could, but some of it was just ingrained into me. So please do this to me. Please help me explain it better. So an observation is just I'm going out here and I'm looking at occurrences or something that just happened, and I'm observing it and tracking in this analysis quantitatively. So just like a number.
So if Anderson Silva fought at a UFC event and got paid, that's one observation.
The amount is one observation.
The amount is one observation.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And some fighters who appear in the data set have since been released from the UFC contract.
Yeah, and some fighters appear more than once.
Right. Okay. Omissions. You have purposely omitted here, as we look at page 5, omitted Ronda Rousey, omitted Conor McGregor, Brock Lesnar, CM Punk, a.k.a. Phil Brooks, or I should say Phil Brooks, a.k.a. CM Punk, and Nate Diaz. Now, everyone is going to say, oh, Eric, you don't know shit. You have since gotten rid of the people that would show, even without pay-per-view money or Reebok money, for example, you have gotten rid of the very people that would demonstrate fighter pay is a lot better than we think it is, or certainly a lot higher. Why have you removed these particular fighters, the clear high earners?
Yeah, absolutely. So they would say I don't know shit, and then I would say, well, you don't know shit either. But more friendly than that. Basically, when I looked at the distribution of pay, so I just put all the pay into a distribution, and everyone's seen like the standard bell curve, right?
Yep.
They were just so astronomically high. They really, really biased the rest of the estimation. So all the analysis coming up after this. And we can explain each of them individually. They don't. Studying Ronda Rousey's paycheck doesn't help me understand a number 15 person or someone just outside the top 15. We know where Ronda Rousey gets paid a lot, right? Because she's Ronda Rousey. Right. So, and as we'll see in a second, when I look at the distribution of pay through UFC events, they're just so astronomically high. So not only do they not offer real substance to this analysis, they're so far off from the average UFC fighter's pay that they actually mess up the analysis. All
right, limitations you have on page 6 here. Selection bias present, non-random sample.
We already went over that, yeah, but we can go over it again if you want.
Just real quickly, what does it mean?
You want a random sample because you don't want any. If we're polling people and I only poll people in rural South Carolina, that's not necessarily a random sample because if you're only polling rural people from South Carolina, you're trying to do a national study.
Right, so you want to know how people feel about Trump, and you only call one county in South Carolina.
Yeah.
You don't get necessarily.
You want a representative sample, yeah.
Right, and non-normal distribution.
Yeah, so we can get into. We'll definitely get into that in a little bit. But basically, one of the assumptions for ordinary least squares regression, which I can explain more later, is that the distribution of the variables are just this natural bell curve.
Right.
And they're not. And that's a really important thing that we can talk about later too.
Okay, so we'll get into that as it presents itself. We now go to page 7 here, or slide 7. Variables, dependent variables, pay, total purse amount, includes both show and win money.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it was kind of a point of contention for me. Do I just do the show, which would be easier to track, or do it because otherwise I have to find the people who lost what their win money would have been. Mm-hmm.
And some people, although it's quite small, but they get one check no matter what.
Yeah, I actually had a friendly discussion on Reddit about this, but it's a very, very small amount, and it's really only the top.
I don't believe that you had a friendly discussion on Reddit.
I tried to be friendly. Right. Yeah. So I wanted to be fair to the UFC as much as I could, right? I know that ESPN put out an analysis in like 2012 or 11 where they said fighters get $6,000. It's like, well, the lowest fighters get $6,000 in 2012. And that's only if they lost. So I wanted to be just totally fair and transparent that these are the potential purse amounts, total purse amounts.
Now, independent variables are things like weight class, gender, career, bonuses. Are they American? How does the fact that they are American matter?
We can get into that. I just wanted to see if there's any difference.
So do American fighters make more than non-American fighters?
we'll get into that.
All right. And so, of course, are you a champion? Did you ever fight another promotion? Age, wins, fights, blah, 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 right?
Yep.
These are all the independent variables.
Yep. So we're measuring how changes in these affect the pay.
So we move to slide 8 here, and this is sort of setting up all of the data you've collected, the samples. You have 74 women's bouts, or I should say observations, rather. And then you have 435 men's. Do you have enough women's data to make any kind of firm conclusion?
Yeah, it's a very fair point. I think if you look at the number of women versus the number of men on the roster, it's representative. I would like to have more, but that's what was available.
All right, so talk me through the rest of what we see here on this slide.
Okay, so the number of total observations is 509 in the sample. We're looking at the mean purse amount, which is kind of interesting to use when you're talking about pay, because there's always going to be really high earners. You know, when you look at it, when you talk about the American income, we talk about the median, but I wanted to put out the median and the mean just so we can understand that there's very high outliers out there. So the mean purse for all the fighters is $92,000. And the median purse is $46,000. So the median basically means if you line up everyone from 1 to 509 being the highest paying one, the middle fighter, 255 whatever would earn $46,000 for the total sample. And so when we're talking about quartiles, it's basically say line up everyone, all the observations 1 to 509. The 25th percentile and lower is going to make $24,000 or less. If you're the third quartile, which is you're the top 25% earners, you're going to earn $100,000 or less.
And when you say earn, is this per observation or?
Yeah, per observation. Yeah, and so the top 10% earners are going to earn between $230,000 and $1 million. And then so the standard deviation is basically a measure of spread. The higher the standard deviation is, it just means there's more outliers. They're not concentrated in one area. Right. So when you look at the standard deviation, which is higher than the mean and very much higher than the median, it just means that there are very high earners that are skewing that.
No, but these don't include Conor McGregor, right?
No, it would be even higher. Yeah.
So if you included that, how much different would it be?
I forget.
Just to go back to the original conversation we were having.
I forget, but basically, when I did the t-test, which are coming up, the confidence interval, and I don't really want to get into that. It's actually very, very complicated. But basically, it would give you an idea of where the mean is going to rest. 95% is the mean. Is going to rest between a certain area.
Okay.
It would give me a negative number because it was so high. It was saying that Ronda Rousey is so high up there that the other observations down here we don't have confidence in them anymore, and it's shifting me into a negative. Potentially, they could earn negative money.
Wow.
So it was really worth it to get them out of there.
Okay. So now we move to our first slide. Here we are on, if my math is correct. No,
9.
I'm losing it. Yes, page 9. Mm-hmm. All observed fighter purses. Mm-hmm. And what are we looking at here? We have kind of like this long extended slope, and then it just sort of goes like a parabolic fashion. What happened here?
Yeah, so this is just, as you can see on the left side, on the y-axis, that's the number is the amount of money for purse, show, and win. And so you can see there's just a lot of people earning $20,000, $40,000, somewhere around there. And then once you get to about the top quarter, the top 25%, it just kind of shoots up. And so this distribution is going to be pretty common across all weight classes, across genders. So this is I feel very confident saying this is the fighter pay scale for the UFC.
This is the graphical representation of what fighter pay basically looks like.
Even with the people who are fighting out of the country or in states that don't record money, I feel confident that this distribution would not change very much.
All right, so slide 10, we are looking at purse amounts by event. Why don't you walk us through this? Yeah,
so just for fun, I put the purse amounts in ascending order and divided them up by event. And one thing is the N is the number of observations. It should be a small N because this is a sample, not the total population. But the N is 514 instead of 509 like in previous slide. That's because I included Conor McGregor, Ronda Rousey, CM Punk, Brock Lesnar.
You didn't want to include.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to illustrate how different it is?
Yeah, exactly. So just look at how astronomically higher they are, right? They're so much higher. It's like a different sport.
Now these other ones that are peaking, like look at these other ones. You have so there are 3 major peaks here, right?
Yeah.
But there are a series of ones that are clear peaks relative to the other ones. Mm-hmm. Like the very first one is a sort of a peak. Who are these kinds of fighters that are not? They're not the Ronda Rouseys, they're not the Conors, they're not the Brocks, but they're somebody.
Yeah. So I'm spacing on who UFC 199 is, but if you look at UFC 214,
Michael Bisping, maybe.
I don't think so.
He fought at 199.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure he got paid like not that much.
Really? Okay, well, whatever.
I don't think he got paid.
Luke Rockhold was on it.
They got paid about $230,000 if I remember correctly for that fight. But if you're looking at 214, the 1 million right there is Daniel Cormier, and you can see there's 500,000 for most champions. Most champions are getting paid about 200,000 plus. Mighty Mouse was like 210, Joanna 210. So yeah. If you look at UFC 200, that's Brock Lesnar. UFC 202 is Conor McGregor in UFC 207 is Ronda Rousey, and they're just crazy high. So they mess up they skew the analysis.
So then we go to 211. This is purse amounts by event. Now you've taken out the Brock Lesnar's. Now you've taken out the Ronda Rousey's and the Conor McGregor's.
Yeah.
And this looks a little bit more concentrated, is what I would say. There's not nearly as much deviation. And I'm not using statistical terms. I'm just saying.
Yeah, there still is, but it's a better sample. There's not so many outliers, and when the outliers aren't so crazy
Pronounced,
out there.
yeah.
Pronounced. A great word.
All right. So then we go to now we're into the female purses. This is slide 12. Or page 12. The female purses. This looks a little bit like the original distribution that we saw. It's not too dissimilar, except it's not as polarized.
Yeah, this distribution you're going to be very familiar with it by the end of this. It's the same for all weight classes, both genders. So, and there are a couple observations there. So some fighters are observed twice. So some of the plateaus you see on like the fifth and fourth one, I think that's the same fighter. In the future slides, after breaking it down by gender, there are names associated with them, so we can give you more details.
All right, so let's look at the distribution now here on page 13 of the male purses. Again, has a similar look, but there is a little bit of a middle concentrated ground here.
Yeah.
I mean, more than the women's side anyway, right?
Yeah.
Anything to take away from that? Other than you also have more samples or observations.
Yeah, more observations in the sample. So we'll get into that more. I don't feel comfortable saying it without prefacing it with the analysis.
Okay. Slide 14. Now here you have names attached.
Yes.
Why don't you walk us through what we're looking at here?
We're looking at individual fighter
Women's strawweight.
We're looking at women's strawweight individual purse amounts show and win between June 16 and December 2017. And I just put their names on it so you know there's no like funny business going on, right? I'm giving you the real observed purse amounts that were that reported by the state commissions. And so if you look at on the side, I put not only the end but the mean, the median, and the standard deviation too. So that's going to be for all of them.
Just as a matter of questions that I think might come up, I know the difference between mean and median. I think most people do, but help me understand what it. I know I can define the difference, but what is the real world difference? Which one is a better representation of pay in this regard?
Yeah, so they're both measures of spread, and the mean and the median. It really depends on what you're trying to do. I just put them both out here to be open and transparent. So the mean itself is just the total, the sum of all divided by the total number. And so it's really sensitive to outliers. So if you have a bunch of people, say I have 9 people making $40,000 and I have one person making $1 million, the mean is going to be really high because it's going to be closer to $1 million. What is that, like over $100,000, right? But if I use the median, the middle, so we have 9 people at 40,000, one person at $1 million, the median is going to be 40,000 because it's just the mid observation.
Right.
So it just depends on what analysis you want to use.
Gotcha. Anything to take away from this? Other than I think at the highest here, my vision is fading.
Joanna.
You have Joanna there at the end.
Yeah. So
Which makes, people are going to say, okay, well, Joanna's the only one who really rates to make this much money. Like, in response to that, you say what?
Oh, we don't know. We don't know what they rate to make, to be honest. But we can get into that later.
Give me a hint of why. We can explore it later, but at least put it in the back of our mind so that we don't have to table every conversation.
Okay, yeah. So it's hard to say what you're worth in a marketplace where there's no real competition. In a marketplace where there's only one buyer of your goods, they have a very strong arm in dictating what your pay will be. And so it's not necessarily what you're worth. That's what I would say.
All right, that's fine. So now we move to the next women's division up, 125.
Yeah.
You're on slide 15 for women's flyweight.
Yeah, and so I actually really hesitated to put this one in here because flyweight's so new. I think the first flyweight. So the
hard to
flyweight,
draw a lot of conclusions from this one.
Yeah, so that's why they're all at 20,000. But I thought it was worth it because 2 people switched over. I think it was Liz Carmouche and Alexis Davis.
Yep.
They did a 125. Yeah, they're on there. So they did a 125 fight. So I just wanted to put this out here, and it doesn't hurt to have it out here, is what I'm going to say.
Sure. Pay is not very high.
Nope.
Then we go to women's bantamweight, a little bit more of the senior division in terms of the relative, in terms of his introduction to the UFC. Here on, I believe, here we go. Slide. What are we? 16 now.
1-6.
Slide
Yes.
16. What are we looking at?
Looking at the same distribution.
Oh, Leslie Smith's still in there.
Yeah, Leslie Smith.
Of course,
is
the
in
interval
there.
you measured, she would be. Yes.
Yes, yeah, of course. Like I said, some people have been released. So we can see the mean is a little bit higher on here, and that's just because there's Miesha Tate in here, and that's because there's a very small number of people in here. There were 18 in the women's flyweight, and there's only 17 observations in the women's bantamweight. And I excluded Ronda Rousey from this, so it's a pretty small N.
Standard deviation is higher too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just because there's more outliers, or there's a more pronounced outlier.
All right, fair enough. So now we move to the men's divisions. We're at 17 on the slide. Men's flyweight. Now here we have just a bunch of donks who make right about the same, and then at the very end it goes up a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of people.
And Demetrius Johnson's counted twice. You take him out, flyweights don't make anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Demetrius Johnson deserves to be paid a lot. I mean, he's probably the best maybe ever.
Sure.
Yeah.
We're not commenting on his worth. We're just
no. I was transitioning, but yeah. Nobody else really gets paid that much. I mean, a couple people. I think Benavidez gets paid $150, but everyone else is getting paid a lot lower than that.
Cejudo is right. At least for this interval, was at 100. Wow.
Yeah.
Tim Elliott at 100, and that's it. So there's, in terms of six-figure earners, at least to what we can measure, in terms of six-figure earners, it's Tim Elliott, Henry Cejudo, Joseph Benavidez, and then Demetrius Johnson, and that's it.
Yeah, and Tim Elliott's is a special case. I think they're all special cases because these are all basically title shots. I think against Demetrius Johnson,
right.
Not Joseph Benavidez, but Tim Elliott made substantially less than $100,000 per fight now.
All right, slide 18, men's bantamweight. This is one of the marquee divisions inside the UFC.
Yeah.
Dominic Cruz was, I think, a champion during this time, or at least was fighting for a title. Yes, that's right.
Yep.
And then you have Uriah Faber right next to him. This one, you got a lot more high-income earners on this one.
Yeah, and I just want to apologize that I couldn't fit more names on here. Once it gets to about 50 or 55, you start skipping names, so I'm sorry about that. But you can see Dominic Cruz is on there. Uriah Faber is measured a few times. It's still the same distribution. Even if I put fighters in observed only one time, so just their most recent instead of all the observations in the sample, it's still the same distribution.
So folks are going to say, okay, I understand what you mean, but clarify that just a little bit. How is it the same distribution? It looks similar, but there are differences.
Yeah.
At what point do the differences matter, I guess is the question. When the distribution says, no, that distribution's different.
Okay. So
I mean, if it's radically different, I know, but what's the middle ground there?
So initially, I only had one observation, the most recent observation for each fighter in here, because I thought that the lower end guys are going to be in and out of the UFC more often, and so that it would skew that lower. And I just decided. And again, eventually, I just decided against only having one observation, just putting them all out here just to be transparent about all of them. To answer your question, it can change. It kind of depends on the division, and just kind of depends on how many times I can observe each fighter. Because if there's some divisions where I observe, like Alistair Overeem, say I observe him 4 times, and there's only 10 heavyweights, then yeah, it's going to skew it.
So we go to slide 19, featherweight. Again, looks a little bit more like one of the women's divisions, to be quite honest with you. Just a handful of high-income earners there.
Yeah, and it's important to note that we're 6 months out from this, where I ended this analysis, so I considered putting more in here, but I think it stands. I think it's solid where it is right now. So the landscape could change a little bit. These distributions could change a little bit, but I don't think they would change substantively.
Slide 20, we have the men's lightweight, which is the marquee division. Now, that high-income earner at the end is Tony Ferguson.
Yeah.
All right, and then you have some other ones. Now, you have a fair number here above 100,000, although the distribution looks the same.
Yeah, it's also 83. The number of observations is 83. So when you think about number of people above 100,000, you also have to consider that there's just more observations in here too.
Right, relative to how many you had. Let's say at
17 or 40.
You had 44, right? You have a lot more. Still, if you had to ask, I mean, which division has not the most above 100,000?
I think heavyweight has the highest earners. I don't know the most above 100,000 though. The most above 100,000. Excuse me.
All right, but certainly the standard deviation 78,000, median 48,000, mean 78,000 for this observable period. Slide 21, welterweight. What do we got?
Yeah, so we're looking at the same distribution.
Tyron Woodley's on there twice.
Tyron Woodley's on there twice. I mean, the top 4 Tyron Woodley fights: Robbie Lawler, Tyron Woodley, Stephen Thompson. Interesting to note is Stephen Thompson actually was slated to earn more than Tyron Woodley at UFC 207 or 209, whichever one it was.
One thing I've noticed here is so the distribution does look the same for all of these, but the number values on the left on the y-axis are a little bit different here.
Yeah.
Folks are going to say, well, you're changing the y-axis. This is going to change from weight class to weight class. That's going to change the shape of the distribution. Why are you doing that?
I mean, I'm not changing. I'm just trying to make it.
It's got different number values.
Yeah, but I'm just scaling it. If you put them all together, it's the same distribution. So I don't.
Nothing there.
There's nothing there.
There are a number of high income earners on this one. The mean nearly $100,000.
Yeah, I mean, there's also.
Although the standard deviation is pretty high as well.
Yeah, standard deviation is really high. Yeah. How many people? There's a lot of people making over 100,000, but a lot of them are Matt Brown, Donald Cerrone,
and also lightweight and at 81.
Yeah, so it's a higher amount. So I didn't look at this, but it'd be interesting to look at the proportion of people per weight class above 100,000.
So now we move to, let's see, middleweight. God, what a barren wasteland middleweight is.
Yep.
Dan Hendo, Anderson Silva raking in dough.
Yep.
And a couple of high earners there along the way. Bisping above 200K. Let's see, Rashad Evans, sort of a legacy guy above 100K. It's like your top 5, top 10 guys, then legacy people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I mean,
the rest of it, they don't make a dime.
Yeah, Luke Rockhold is, I think, 350 right there. I think that might be 194 or whatever it was when he fought Bisping. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, it's pretty stark cutoff, and then it just jumps up for the legend guys.
And the mean the end rather, I should say, is back to 51. So you got light heavyweight. I mean, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Look at that. Slide
Slide
23. There's nothing there.
It's a little exacerbated because Daniel Cormier's at 1 million, so it kind of like draws out the scale. But it's pretty barren on the left side over there, right? And there's names associated with them, so it's like these are people making 20K, up to 20K for a fight, and it's pretty low, meager earnings.
That jumps us down now to heavyweight. This was interesting. You got a lot of high earners there, like a tale of two different graphs on this one, except on the right side, it's a bunch of repeat names. Yeah,
it's Overeem, Mark Hunt, Fabricio Verdum, Under Arlovski, Cain Velasquez, Travis Brown quite a few times.
It's the mean 204K, standard deviation 200 and nearly 60K. Mm-hmm. It's got to be the highest standard deviation for any of the weight classes, right?
Yeah, definitely. Just because there's these two stories, like you said, there's this really high earner, and then there's just this 20,000 earners on the bottom.
All right, so now that jumps us to slide 25, difference in earnings by weight class. So you've got all the weight classes here that are known, and you got the mean next to the median. I'll tell you what stands out to me and tell me what's wrong, or if I'm wrong here. The averages you can see, like on women's bantamweight or at heavyweight, they're really kind of high in certain ways, or at least there's a big gap between that and the median. But the median, you'll recall, right? You take out those few high-income earners. We've already talked about the Connors and the Rouseys, but even the Cormiers, right, or the Silvas, ignore that. Live recording here, sort of. And what ends up happening is the median is so much lower.
Yeah.
Because it's just the middle of that
just
pack.
The middle of the pack, exactly. Yeah. So
but there's value in both, right?
There's value in both, and it
just depends what you're looking for.
You should look at both, and then depending on what analysis you want to do, you should use one or the other. Throughout this the analyses that are coming up, I use both. I use ANOVA's and Kruskal-Wallis test, which are analysis of the mean and the median. But yeah, I mean, the mean is just super duper sensitive to outliers. So when you see heavyweight with like Alistair Overeem, Mark Hunt up there, it just draws it up. Yeah.
205K, not the weight.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So now we're at slide 26, analysis of variance. There's a lot of math on this one.
Here we go,
Eric.
Here we go.
Okay, you got Bartlett's test for equal variances.
Don't even worry about that. Yeah.
You got probability greater than Chi 2. Help me understand what we're looking at here.
Okay, this is an ANOVA analysis of variance. All you really need to care about on this one is the probability greater than F on the right side. It's basically saying that.
What is F?
Oh God, I don't want.
It's too much.
Okay, okay. It's basically saying that
there's a point where less is more with some of this stuff.
It's basically saying that when I divided up the incomes, the purse amounts by weight class, and put them in groups, boop, 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 all along, this probability is saying that there is a difference between at least one of them. One of these groups is higher or lower and statistically significant. And as I said earlier, statistically significant means that the differences observed are not due to random chance, and expected through repeated sampling would do the same, have the same results. So this is saying at least one weight class is different. I did a Bonferroni test afterwards on this, and basically heavyweight is significantly higher than all the other weight classes. Statistically significantly higher than all the other weight classes. That's what you should know about this.
So there's a difference in purses per weight class that's non-random.
Yes, that's not due to like poor sampling. I mean, it could potentially be poor sampling, but it's just saying the characteristics of the sample that we're observing are structured in a way that it's not a random. There's some method behind the difference.
Got it. Okay. So that takes us now to difference in earnings by gender, slide 27.
Yeah.
Just the difference between the mean and the median on the men's side a little higher.
Yeah, and so this was actually the initial question I started with, but it kind of blossomed out from here. Yeah, you can see the men's. This is also in the summary statistics. The men's and the women's, I think the men's is like 94, 6,000, something like that, and the women's is 59,000. And you can see that there's differences between both the means and the medians. The medians are less drastic, but I do want to say that the median is a measurement of the middle variable, so differences in there are more sensitive than as opposed to the means.
Got it. All right. So now we go to slide 28, the group comparison and the gender. Male and female UFC fighters have a statistically significant difference between means as well as medians.
Yeah,
What
exactly.
can we infer from that?
Not much right now. It's just saying that there's some variation in here that's by design, and anybody who just ends right here, don't trust them. Anybody who ends at the t-test, don't trust them. But one thing that I would suggest you look at is if you look at on the left side is the 2-sample t-test. There's the DIFF. If you go over 2, it says negative 31,981.17 cents. That's basically saying the observed difference in the means between the women and men and women is $31,000.
In the means.
The means, excuse me, yeah. And that the difference is statistically significant. If you really care about it at the bottom, you can see that the men are higher than the women. And then the median is saying that there's a difference between them too.
Right. Okay. But there could be some explanations for that, which we'll get to a little bit later.
There are explanations for that, yes.
All right. Difference in earnings between American fighters. So the American mean and the foreign mean...
Pretty similar.
There's somewhat of a difference in the median. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean? How would you explain that?
How do I interpret this?
How do you interpret that? Yes.
I would say that the highest level guys, regardless of nationality, earn their way to the top and make comparable purses, but I would say that there are probably some limitations to the development of foreign fighters when you look at like Mexico or Germany. That the average fighter from Germany is probably no offense to Germany because ich liebe Deutschland, but they probably are a little bit lower quality than the average like American or Brazilian fighter, which are these powerhouse.
Right.
So, and then when you go to the statistics on the next slide.
Right. So slide 30.
Yeah. So the difference there is no statistically significant difference between means, but there is a statistically significant difference between medians.
Right.
So I think that kind of supports what I was just saying, and which is kind of the reason I said it. But
right.
Yeah.
But that difference could be meritocratic.
It could be. Yeah. Right. That's the argument I'm making.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Difference in earnings by fighting in other promotions. So if you fought in you have Pride WC Strikeforce, let's call it Zuffa Legacy. Mm-hmm. Boy, the differences could not be more stark. And if you did not fight in Pride WC Strikeforce, although I would imagine that would mean you fought somewhere else because not many people made their pro debut inside the UFC.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, you make a lot more money.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a really, really big difference, and you can see that in the mean and the median. If you go to the statistics,
and just so folks are clear, we're going to get to championship analysis. But that's not what you could have been a champion in Strikeforce and be included in this.
Yeah,
but it's not
the only
folks are gonna say, well, yeah, it was Daniel Cormier, Luke Rockhold, but this is about anybody who can just check off on the box.
Yeah,
WEC, Pride.
Yeah. This is binary. I'm only dividing people up in a binary or dichotomous variable. So it's just everyone in there. Did they fight in Pride, Strikeforce, or WEC? Yes or no. That's it. So there's a whole bunch of other variables that aren't accounted for in this specific measurement right here.
Got it. All right. So that takes us to slide 32, the group comparison. Fighters who didn't fight in another large promotion and fighters who did, there's a statistically significant difference between them.
Yep.
But and there is one as well for medians too.
Yeah.
So both ways.
Exactly.
You just make a lot more money if you fought in a Zuffa Legacy organization.
Yeah, exactly. And this is just only off of fighting in another organization. So there could be controls that I do put in here that we'll examine later. One thing that's interesting about this, if you look on the left side, again, the DIFF, the middle of the left side, and you go over negative 195,011, that's saying that if you did not fight in WC Pride or Strikeforce, on average, the mean will be $195,000 less. So that's a numeric value to the graph I presented previously.
Okay, so it takes us now to slide 33, difference in earnings by rank. Look at this. And this is the 32,000, what number value is that?
It's the median.
It's the median value.
Yep. So it just took all 509.
Oh, right. Median earnings. They're on the y-axis.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so they have 59,000 for ranked fighters, so number 5 or 6 or whatever.
Yep.
And then for champion, 300,000. Does that include interim champs? Was there interim champs in that?
Yeah, that included interim champs.
Yeah.
Yes, it did. And so one thing that I think is important to know is that some fighters were ranked and then became unranked. If they were I can't think of off the top of my head an example, but I basically went to Fight Pass and looked at the fight when they walked in, what their rank was, what their age was. So it was just like fresh to the moment. So sometimes if you're number 15, you lose, and next time I observe you, you're not ranked. So you could be in both categories.
Right, I see. But look at the difference. It's unbelievable. I mean, there's a difference between ranked and unranked. Okay, fair enough. But it is categorically different to be
Absolutely.
a champion. No
Absolutely.
wonder these guys, we were talking about this earlier, Daniel Cormier was like, well, after UFC 214, getting his title handed to him, and I remember he saying to me, I was a little hesitant because for pride issues, but the money's so much better.
Gotta eat, man.
You'd be stupid not to take that title.
Absolutely, yeah.
Forget pride. Fuck pride. Get paid.
Get paid, man.
The analysis of variance on rank here, anything to infer from the math here for the math nerds who, again, if the math nerds want to check it out here on slide, what number are we on here? 34, they can look at that. But for the rest of the us Joes, what can we learn here?
For just you Joes, the bottom, well, fuck, I don't know if I can be like...
I like how you like, I don't know how to talk to you
No,
mortals.
it's like it's a whole different language, right? That it's inclusive and exclusive at the same time.
Right.
So it's hard to do. Basically, what I'm looking at is if you look at the bottom, there's the H of O, which is the null hypothesis for 3 of them between rank 1, which is unranked, and rank 2 is unranked. 1 is unranked, 2 is ranked, and 3 is champion. We're seeing the difference between 1 and 2. There's the 0, 0, 0 is the probability there's a difference. So there's statistically significant difference between ranked, unranked, unranked champion, and ranked and champion. So they're all different.
All 3 of them.
Yeah.
In any kind of pairing, they're all significantly different.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. All right, regression, estimating the model, slide 35. Let's actually jump to 36. So we're looking at 2 different graphs here. On the one, you have the actual, and the other one, the ideal. Folks are going to say, all right, so what? It doesn't have a nice...
some squiggles.
It just doesn't have a nice, pretty shape. Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Who gives a shit, Eric?
Everyone should give a shit. So there are assumptions that need to be met for regression to put out good coefficients to estimate correctly.
Yep.
And one of the main assumptions is that there is a normally distributed dependent variable. So that's the ideal over there. You can just see that bell curve that everyone learned in high school or undergrad, right? But in the actual is what really showed up. So you can see there's this huge conglomerate, I guess, right, on the left side of all the low income earners, and then there's a few people that are earning on the right side. So that's just not it doesn't work. It's not going to work very well if you do if you use regression with a dependent variable distributed like that.
Like if you joined a job and you said you got 2 job offers, right? You getting out of college, right? You in academia,
okay,
right? You get your PhD in
maybe
stats.
Yeah, hopefully.
Right. On the one hand, you can go to X university on the left, and that's how you're going to get. That's how all the professors there get paid. Or you can go to university on the right, and that's how all the professors there get paid. You would probably pick the one on the right, right?
Well, no. No. Let's just say I'm not saying one is the values are better than the other.
Okay, but all of the values on the one on the left are all skewed to the low end.
Yeah, but I mean it doesn't tell you how this tells you the percent right here on the left side of it. But maybe it's Harvard, right? Maybe the people that are far right are just like these Nobel laureates that deserve to be have gigantic paydays, and the
yeah. But let's say you knew the actual dollar value. That would change things.
I'm going to say yes, but I think there's so many conditions in there that I don't know.
You have academic conditions. I just want to give you the
This one looks more fair, but under other conditions, I could see the.
But you can't have it both ways. You are making the claim that the ideal curve. Why is it ideal?
So it's ideal for regression. It's not ideal for just being in existence. I see. Yeah.
Okay. Nevertheless, that then moves us down to slide 37, the regression model. You have data is censored, not censored. What is the difference?
Okay. So censored, if you look at the example down there, you can see there would be a pretty normal distribution.
Part of the graph is missing, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
Not missing, but
it's not missing exactly. So where the graph would be filled in by these observations, the yellow, it just piles up at one area, which basically means that you can't observe it below that. So everything below that is basically or potentially measured at that one value.
So why did you do that?
Well, can I give you the example of why, of what this means? Mm-hmm. So if you think of a car that's driving, say you put a pin in your speedometer that makes the speedometer not go past 80 miles per hour.
You got an old ass car. All of them are digital now. I know what you mean. Though. Let's say you're driving grandma's car.
Oh, yes? Sure. Hey, man. A lot of people drive shit like that still. No shame in that. So say your speedometer can't go past 80 for whatever reason, right? But you are driving past 80 miles per hour. You can say, I know how heavy my car is, how hard the engine's working, how heavy I am, how big the wheels are, blah, 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 all these things.
Friction,
and
you can do all the physics of it.
Yeah. And you can get all these other variables, the independent variables, and then you can learn how fast the car is actually going or provide an estimate that's hopefully reliable. So when data is censored like that, it's better to use a different type of regression. OLS regression, ordinary least squares regression, is like the standard one that everyone uses.
Here's the question. You talk about the pin being the speedometer. Why is there a pin here?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question, and I'm sorry I didn't address it earlier. When you look at the fight, so I said I started looking at fighters in June 2016, right? And that's because all the fighter pay was standardized then to 10,000 to show, 10,000 to win, right? So that's the lower limit, right? So they can't be below that. Right. So potentially, ostensibly, fighters could be worth less than $20,000, but they are earning $20,000, right? It's just like the minimum wage. You can't make less than minimum wage, but your work may be valued less than minimum wage.
Got it.
And so instead of using the regular regression, I use a Tobit censored regression, which will give us a more reliable
a Tobit censored regression model instead of the OLS linear regression. If you had used the OLS linear regression, I was going to really, stick it to you for your poor academic ways.
It's important, man. Like I said, good analysis is accurate, precise. Great analysis is open and honest.
All right. So then that moves us now down here a little bit. I believe, what slide are we on here as I look
38.
for it? 38?
38.
So data transformation. Here we have a series of 9 graphs, and this is the same data, but just presented in different ways. Why did you do that?
Okay. So when I said I wanted a normal distribution, when you want a normal distribution for your variables, it's really important. So one way to do that is if the actual data in the real world doesn't show up as a normal distribution, you can transform it, which doesn't really change the relationship between the between the values. But what it does is it just makes it look behave differently in the graph. So like an easy way to do it is just take the value and just log it, and then, or you can square root it, right? Or you can square it. So say a value is 2. If you square the 2, it becomes 4. But if you square 10, it becomes 100. So it transforms the data in different ways, and by transforming it, it retains the interaction between itself, but it becomes more of a standard distribution, which provides better estimates.
Provides better estimates of what?
In the regression, the outputs will be more accurate.
Okay.
That's the best way I can say that.
Right. Okay. So now we go to the regression results. A lot of math here. Anything we should know?
All the stars are statistically significant. I want to break them down in a second.
Okay. So then that jumps us.
One more thing.
Sure.
The N on this is 507. That's because Chris Cyber was dropped in this.
Ah, okay. What, any particular reason?
Yes, because I analyzed by weight class. And I didn't assign her any weight class, and otherwise I'd have to assign her an individual weight class, and which I thought would bias the estimate.
Oh, I see.
So I just took her out.
Right. Maybe going forward there would be a change after the next season of Ultimate Fighter when they're ostensibly going to pull in women for that weight class, but
yeah.
Neither here nor there. Okay, that takes us now to slide 40. What this means, and you've got things here: post-fight bonuses, increase in rank, each win 3 stars by, which I'm sure you'll have an explanation for. Former champion fought in WC Strikeforce Pride, and then fighting for a title. What are we looking at?
We're looking at an easier way to interpret the regression table that I put in the previous slide. So one thing that's very important to understand is these are average effects across all 507 observations in the sample. So we can pinpoint individual people that did not increase their purse by 4% after X amount of, or after one post-fight bonus, but this is saying across all of the observations, that's the average effect that will happen. So what you have to like drill into your brain as like a beginning academic is this phrase: on average, a 1 unit increase or one post-fight bonus, earning one post-fight bonus will increase a fighter's purse amount by 4%, holding all else constant. And the holding all else constant is actually pretty important. It basically means that everything else about us is the same. So it's basically saying you're the same person, but one person has one more post-fight bonus. So
in other words, the fighting for a title, I think we talked about this earlier. You and I have the same resumes, and everything about us is we could be twins almost.
Yep.
But if you're even fighting for a title, which doesn't include the pay-per-view points from being champion, your pay would jump 112%.
112%. It would over double. It would over double if you're fighting for a title.
It's unbelievable.
Absolutely, yeah. And like I said, this is holding all as constant. So when you look at fight in WC, Strikeforce, or Pride, that's saying the same age fighter with the same number of wins, blah, 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 all the other variables that we talked about earlier.
Right.
Just fighting in WC or Strikeforce is statistically significant, and you have an increase of 31%. Sorry, I think you're about to say something. I'm going to interrupt you one more time. So the stars on the each win is that when I estimated this regression, I said 11% for each win. Like that doesn't really seem very accurate, because you can look at people who make 10-10, 20,000, and they win, they get 12-12, 24,000. So what I did was I just estimated the model with just unranked fighters, and the output was, I think, 19% increase for each win. So I'm pretty confident that this model is accurate. It's just that it's an average effect across the lowest ranked and the highest ranked fighter.
Got it. Okay. It's pretty crazy what you can get. Being any kind of proximity to the title. Being a champion, fighting for a title, or having been a champion, that's how you get paid in this business.
Yeah, absolutely.
What else this means? A higher number of fights outside of the UFC was not observed to be associated with a higher purse amount. So that's different than saying you fought in WEC, Pride, or Strikeforce, because there's some kind of value to being legacy in Zuffa that is independent of just having a shitload of fights outside the UFC and then coming to it. Is that the way to understand that?
Yeah, that's a good way to understand it. So fighting in WC, Strikeforce, or Pride was just a yes, no, did you or did you not? The number of fights was measured in just how many fights did you have, right? Yeah. So that's a continuous variable between 0 and I think 30 or 40. Yeah.
Okay. A long career was not observed to be associated with a higher purse amount. This one I don't quite understand. Everyone's going to tell you the longer you've been there, the more money you make. Why is that not true?
So I looked at how long they've been fighting, and that wasn't, when controlled with other variables, that wasn't observed to be statistically significant and related for increasing or decreasing the purse amount. I think that
how many guys who have been there 5 years are making 20 and 20? Not many, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. How can you say that it's not?
I'm telling you that the output from the regression says that that's not the case. That it's not how long you've been there; it's how much you win and how many bonuses you get.
Oh, I see. So it's not tenure by itself.
Yeah.
It's just that tenure might itself be associated with wins.
Yeah. I'm just saying, just being there in stasis is not associated with anything. It doesn't increase or decrease your purse, which makes sense when you think contracts just float, right, in between fights. Right. It's just fighting and winning.
And then gender was not observed to influence a fighter's purse when other variables were introduced into the model. So we thought a difference.
There was
between the pay between men and women's. And what you're telling me is when you actually account for other factors, it's not there. It's not there.
It's not there, which is great. News. Really good news. Yeah,
that's really good news. Okay, summary of findings. Men and women fighters were observed to have a statistically significant difference in mean and median purse amount, which we had talked about. But as you noted, a women's purse mean and median were observed to be lower by about, let's say, $39K and $1750, respectively. When controlled for other factors, this difference was no longer statistically significant. Do we know why?
When you account for how long they fought in the UFC, how many wins they have, how many bonuses they have, those things go away. One thing you can say is the women's divisions are newer, right? So they may not have had the time to get the wins, may not have had the time to get the bonuses, things that do increase the purses. So. And
then fighters who fought in Zuffa legacy organizations, we'll call them, have a statistically significant different mean and median purse amount, and an increase of 171K or so was observed in the means of fighters who fought in other promotions. A difference was observed when controlled with other factors. This is slide 42.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty crazy. So it's got to be like a loyalty system there, right?
It's performance like that. And loyalty. That's my understanding of the results, yeah. If you perform and if you're loyal to the UFC, you're going to get paid more.
So that takes us now to slide 43, I believe. Yes? Let's see. Heavyweight was the only weight class observed to earn a statistically significant different purse amount. Heavyweight mean purse amounts were higher than women's strawweight by 140K. And flyweight, 153K mean purse amounts.
Yeah, those are the highest ones. We saw in the ANOVA that heavyweight was higher than all the other weight classes, but in the regression, once we controlled for other variables, heavyweight was only higher than women's strawweight and women's flyweight.
So it does make more money, but not quite as much as we thought.
Still a lot, but yeah, not as much as in the ANOVA, which is just like I said in the beginning, the ANOVA and the T-test, those are like very fundamental, rudimentary things that are great for exploring, but don't rely on those outcomes. Yeah.
Fair enough. Unranked, ranked, and championship level fighters have a statistically significant difference in median purse amounts. Unranked 30, ranked 61, champion 300K.
Yeah, so this variable wasn't included in the regression model.
The numbers look similar, though.
Yeah, so this is exactly from the Kruskal-Wallace test I did previously. I measured ranking through a different way on the regression because you can't use you can, but you have to work around it. You can't use categorical variables, which are just instead of like continuous from like a negative infinity to infinity, just. Anyway, so I used it differently. So this is just the Kruskal-Wallace test previously. This wasn't included in the regression. In the regression, I used a value of 0 to 16, 16 being champion and 0 being unranked.
Okay.
And so that was how I measured the ranking impact.
Got it. Okay. And then the bottom 75, the bottom 3 quartiles make less than 100K per fight. The top 10% or so make around 230K per fight in disclosed pay, but God only knows how much that changes with undisclosed pay, right?
Yeah.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, when we were looking at, if you look at Lorenzo Fertitta, who interviewed with ESPN a few years ago.
Back in the day.
He said 39 of their fighters get, I think it was 39, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think it was 39 of their fighters get pay-per-view points. And back then there were about 350 fighters, so you're looking at only the top 10% getting pay-per-view points, if that carries through.
Yeah, well, he also, I mean, Dana White once said, look how many millionaires we made. We're like, well, how do you define millionaires? And I can't remember exactly how much the example was crazy, but it was something like, if we paid you $100,000 over 10 fights, but that could be, 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you're a millionaire. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't think that's true.
Yeah, and academia is just about arguing how to define things. So,
and we kind of went over this before. On average, each hero slide 44, bonus earned increased purse amount by 4%, increase in ranking by about 5.5%. Winning the UFC increases a fighter's purse by about 11%. Also, being a former champ, about 30%. Having fought in Zuffa Legacy, 31%. And fighting for a belt increases purse amount by 112%. That is insane. Takes us to slide 45, discussion of market failures. What is a negative externality? And here you have listed CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
Yeah. Can I take a step back though?
Yeah, sure.
Just to talk about market failures, because a lot of people think when they hear the word failure, it just doesn't work at all. A market failure doesn't mean the market doesn't work.
It's not Venezuela collapsing.
Yeah, exactly. It just means that in the market there are inefficiencies in the allocation of resources. Is that too jargony for you?
No, that's fine.
Okay, cool. So that basically the market isn't the most efficient it could be for certain reasons. And the externalities, information asymmetry, and monopoly are the three main causes, the three main market failures.
This is just a really basic example, but I think we've talked about this before. Negative externality in a market could be a great company doing great work, all different ways in which it's helping a population, but there could be pollution that they produce as well, right? That could be a negative externality as a market failure.
A key thing is for externalities is that they are not accounted for cost-wise in the market themselves.
Right.
So pollution by itself, unless you put a tax on it, then it can be accounted
so
for.
there could be a carbon tax, but if you're just dumping shit in a river.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, there's also positive externalities, like libraries have positive externalities on the community.
Right.
And on average, negative externalities are oversupplied and positive externalities are undersupplied.
All right, so why do you have CTE listed?
Because they're fighting, and I believe there's a negative externality from the fight, which is CTE, which isn't being, there's research funded on it, but I mean, we look at people like Gary Goodridge, right, who have some serious brain injury. That cost is not being accounted for in the market, at least not explicitly.
Information asymmetry as a moral hazard. What's up there?
Okay, so those are two things we have to unpack. First of all, information asymmetry, people who are familiar with it might just think that it's just, something I don't know. But in the real sense, it's more than that. It's something that you know that I can't possibly know and you're withholding from me. So one example is if you're selling me a car, I can go look at the engine, I can check the AC or whatever, right? But then maybe the wheels aren't aligned, right? That's still some low level of information asymmetry. Real problematic, insidious information asymmetry is that you're selling me a rocket ship and I have no fucking clue what's going on with the rocket ship. Right. And so you're like, he has no clue that this engine is broken. You're going to sell me that way. So it's worse than just not knowing what you don't know.
Folks have brought up, fighters can audit the UFC for a pay-per-view. Well, let's assume that's true for a second.
Not in anything we're doing here, though.
Well, hold on. That might be true, but I can only audit as a champion. Let's say if I'm Rampage Jackson back in the UFC, because that was when it came up. Maybe I can audit my pay-per-view results, but I can't audit Jon Jones's, Daniel Cormier's, Ronda Rousey's, Conor. I can't audit any of that. I can just audit what my sales are. Mm-hmm. So there's still total information asymmetry.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's guaranteed by design, right?
It's for sure.
Guaranteed by
They haven't
design.
gone public for a reason.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. And so moral hazard is something that comes out of information asymmetry. It's when you know you're withholding information from me, and the cost of that part of the transaction, you're saying he doesn't know about it. So I'm going to make him pay for that part of the transaction.
Right.
So
we're going to go into negotiation. I actually know how much you're worth, but you don't, and therefore I can bargain down for your wages.
So moral hazard, I think a lot of it, like before we knew about black lung or whatever, right? Moral hazard was the coal mine may have known about black lung, right, and they just said, we're not going to tell it. Yeah. They're going to take that. They're going to take the moral hazard.
And then monopoly, monopsony, two different kinds there. What's the difference and why they matter?
Okay, so monopoly is one seller within a market. Monopsony is one buyer within a market. And when you look at sports, it's monopsony. Like the NFL is the only purchaser of high-level athletes, high-level football players. So the UFC is, whether or not the lawsuit that's pending litigation right now comes out and says they're a monopoly, they are a monopoly, a monopsony.
Why can't Bellator or PFL or ONE matter here?
So one defining characteristic of monopolies and monopsonies are that one firm or one buyer shouldn't be able to dictate market price and shouldn't be the market itself. If the UFC just evaporated and just didn't exist anymore as of right now, the market couldn't sustain itself at the level it is right now. So it's a very big indicator.
If Bellator went away.
Yeah, Bellator went away. The UFC would just buy Bellator's people, and it'd be the same situation.
Here we go, slide 46. Discussion continued. Nobody knows who gets paid what.
Yeah, one thing I want to add to that last part, though, is that the UFC is very rational in what they're doing, keeping prices low and maximizing profit. But you've talked about this previously, but it's important to talk about again and hammer home is that in the short run, the UFC is making more money off of these practices of information asymmetry and monopsony. But it's better for a company to have a smaller share of a larger and growing pie than it is for them to have a larger share of a smaller pie. So it's very rational and short-sighted. So to get into the next slide, nobody knows who's getting paid what in the UFC. You said Rampage Jackson could audit pay-per-views and that's about it, right? Stipe Miocic was furious that Overeem made more than him at UFC 203 or 204.
Yeah.
And people don't really know, but Thompson was slated to make more than Woodley when they fought at UFC 207 or 9, whichever one it was. So nobody knows really who's getting paid. And what we're looking at here isn't even the total picture. It's just disclosed purse value. So there's so much more beyond that, that it's just systematic withholding of information from the fighters.
UFC leadership has a history of squelching unionization.
They do, absolutely. If you think the UFC isn't actively or passively preventing unionization, then you're not looking. You can look at Zuffa. I know they're not technically Zuffa anymore, but Zuffa and the Culinary Union in New York State, excuse me, they wouldn't let the Culinary Union unionize in their station casinos, if I'm not mistaken. And then especially when you look at the MMAAA.
Say double M, triple A.
Double M, triple A. I'm sorry, man. That gets me. Okay, so if you look at the people who came out on stage with Bjorn Rebney, you look at their purse values. It was late November, early December 2016. If you look at their purse values before they showed up on stage, Cerrone was making 85, and afterwards he made 155. I'm pretty sure it's 155 afterwards. Dillashaw. So you actually know the answer to this one now. Who was the lowest paid fighter at UFC 200?
Enrique Marin.
Yeah, we talked about this previously. Who was the second lowest paid fighter?
I thought it was Rafael Sunsel, but it's not.
TJ Dillashaw, 25.
Wow.
And he was making, I think, $100K to fight Dominic Cruz before that. So he fought Enrique Marin in July, made 25, and then he fought John Lineker, I think, in late December, which was after the meeting, and his purse went to 100. And then St. Pierre got the Bisping fight off of that. So I think it's important to know that maybe they're not outright explicitly saying, shut your mouth and we'll pay you more. But if, there might just be a little bit more lenient during contract negotiations for people that are upset, that have the sway to potentially unionize. So I think it's very reasonable to say that the UFC is preventing unionization, especially now when you look just recently with Leslie Smith, right? There's no real reason she should have been let go. A top 10, I think it was top 10, number 9 fighter.
2-fight win streak.
With a 2-fight win streak who's people care about, but she's on Project Spearhead.
The Dillashaw one, though, wasn't he champion when they did the double M AAA meeting?
No.
He was not?
He was not, no.
Okay. I guess I misremembered that. Interesting. And then the Cerrone one, 85, and then post 155K just to show. Crazy. In closing, sampling bias is present, and bias we talked about before. It's not, it's not racism or let's own the libs or anything. It is
inaccuracies in the predictions.
Correct. So what is is present as is potential admitted variable bias, but much can be learned from this study. Limitations are likely by design, information asymmetry. Right. We just don't know what we don't know, and we can't know it. Mm-hmm. Nevertheless, we are going to post this entire study, and we'll post the results and then the slides in the comment section below, or excuse me, in the description box below, so you can check that out there. It does not appear that the UFC is systematically paying women less, which is great.
Yes.
Other factors impacting purse amount were identified and explored, which is good to know.
I mean, the women pay was the initial analysis.
Was the genesis of this.
Yeah, and it blossomed out of here, which I think is a very valuable thing. I hope people do find value in it. I think it's not perfect. I think there's a lot in here to learn, and I think that it's fairly accurate in this analysis.
Please feel free to contact him at Aerick. He's got extra letters in his name for reason. You got extra letters on both sides, because you can just spell Eric ERIC. But you decided AERICK
I decided.
MMA@gmail.com.
I decided that in the womb.
It's all your fault.
Yeah.
All your fault.
It was a birthday present.
But if folks have questions about the math or what terms mean, or maybe they see something, they can shoot you an email about this, right?
Absolutely. So in academia, it's just trial by fire, right? You know, you put out what you think, and people come and tell you why you're wrong, and sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. So if there's any concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. I feel pretty confident what I put out here, but that doesn't mean it's perfect.
And of course, special thanks to me. Yeah, goddamn
Absolutely.
right. Goddamn right.
Absolutely.
Question about this. Here's what I'm guessing. You might get a lot of actual emails. If you do, I'm not saying don't answer them, but if there are still questions that remain about what the math means, what the terms mean, what can we infer, what can we not infer, what are the lessons here, we might do like a follow-up episode to this.
Absolutely.
Just to clarify some things, right?
This is an important issue, and I think people should talk about it.
Right.
I think they should.
And here's the deal. We're going to be doing more of these as well, right? Because you have one study done on insurance, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't give away any details.
No.
You have to come back for more. So we'll be doing more with Aerick. He's going to have a little bit of time off. How close are you, by the way, to getting your PhD?
Oh, 3 more years.
Oh, you got a while.
Yeah, I'm not even in the whatever. Yeah, I'm not there yet.
No, you're not in the dissertation
No,
stage?
not in the dissertation, no.
No. Maybe you'll do it on this. I don't know. Does anybody care in academia?
No, absolutely not. So the data that I use for this analysis, I plan to eventually post online, and you can put it out somewhere. I can put it on Reddit, whatever.
Right.
I found a very low impact sports economics journal, and I'm weighing the options if I'm going to write something about this over the summer. So eventually I'll put the information out so you can check it yourself, but not immediately.
Shoot him an email if you have any questions. Again, we'll put the thing up on the screen, but AerickMMA@gmail.com. I'm just going to say Aerick.
You're killing me, man. You're killing me.
Aerick MMA@gmail.com again.
L-ook at...
Yes, Luke Thomas. If you have any more, you can shoot him an email. Shoot me an email as well, LukeThomasNews@gmail.com. Any questions? And again, if you're looking to look at the slides, they're in the description box below. That is Aerick. I am Luke. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back soon with another one of these. Thank you guys for watching.